All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our next panel. And I apologize for just hitting the microphone so loudly. We are all now bombarded with information about AI, and our next panel aims to untangle the crucial components and applications for television, specifically in terms of what a company's top decision makers need to understand about it. So here to help in that task are our esteemed panelists, who are all fast becoming AI experts on the fly. Colin Benedict is the VP of News at Morgan Murphy Media. And I believe the first time in quite a while we've had Morgan Murphy involved. So welcome.
Thanks for having us.
James Finch is the VP of News Services at Gray Television. Michael Newman is Director of Transformation at Graham Media Group. Philippe Petitpont is CEO and co-founder of Newsbridge. And Aaron Young is the founder and the CEO of Ticker. Welcome to you all. And I just want to note, they are going to be available, our speakers, for press questions. If there are any reporters in the room, I'll just ask you to refrain from questions in here, and right after this session, they'll be next door and available to talk in great and voluminous more detail above and beyond what we discuss here right now. Now, we're going to spend the lion's share of this conversation around generative AI, which is really what people are talking about when they're talking about AI these days. But before we do, I want to start by getting a baseline on how AI has been used by the TV industry so far for years now, really. And Colin, I want to put you on the spot to share some of the non-controversial elements of AI that have been around, like transcription. I mean, I use it every week for transcribing, captioning, monitoring, things like that. Where's the safe AI?
Yeah, I think there's a space there. So we have 6 local newsrooms, some of them in the smallest markets in the country. And it's been centered around using AI around just making our jobs easier, more efficient. So, you mentioned a couple of use cases. Transcription is an obvious one that's become standard place in our newsrooms. Using AI to monitor social media, or using AI to understand what your consumers might be interested in. All those things are commonplace and generally accepted already. Captioning is another good example. We have that in place in many of our markets where it, essentially is just, using that transcription and then delivering that to the consumer. So, we look at generative AI, and we will, I'm sure, get into this, we're looking at it through a similar lens in the sense of how do we use this to help our journalists do a better job. And some of that will be around efficiency, and then many other aspects of that too.
And we have with captioning, I should add, there's almost real-time translation now into any number of languages too.
Right.
So there's that. And then like compliance monitoring, AI is very big for that. I don't think anybody's freaking out about applications in that area. So some of it's fine and good and all is well. James, what has been the upshot of using these kinds of AI in terms of efficiencies and costs to date? I mean, in terms of how the C-suite sees the implementation to this point, how has it been received?
Yeah, well, I can speak about 2 types of AI that we use, and to answer that, so from a transcription standpoint, obviously it's a time saver. We use one particular AI vendor for transcription, and we use them because they're approved by our task force, I would say our AI task force, because their model is that if we put something in, it can be deleted, and it's deleted everywhere. So from a time-saving standpoint, that's good for us, and it does not violate any of our document retention rules. For ASR, the caveat is that it has to be trained properly to do its job. But the cost of using ASR is really a fraction of what it would cost us to do live captioning, with a caption service.
Isn't the latency really better now?
Yes, but we have to make sure that it is trained, because obviously we're in 113 markets, and will it properly translate some of the uniquely named places that we're in, so that we don't get, FCC complaints from folks who are getting a garbled message.
Which they've get before, to be fair, too, with human transcription from time to time. Just a little quick impromptu straw poll out there. Anybody use AI for transcription in the room? I use it. And it's wonky from week to week, depending on regional accents often and So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's pretty fast. Okay, so along comes generative AI, and this opens up a whole new transformative flank in the world, in the AI world. Now, Philippe, and you are a scientist, a data scientist or computer scientist, can you distinguish for us, kind of semantically and meaningfully, what is different about generative AI and the potential extent of its capacities?
So let's define the word first, maybe. So we can categorize, well, in our industry, I would say, AI into 3 different categories. So the first one is the monomodal AI, can be also called AI expert system. So the one we've been speaking about, transcription, face detection. Well, this is AI that have been on the market for like 20 years, and that's working well, but that's doing just one thing. And but that's working. That's taking a picture and saying something in the picture. There's a face, and this is the face of these people. Gen AI is way different because it's creating data. So it's the way it's way different is that the way it has been trained is totally different. Gen AI is relying on a paradigm called the transformers. So nothing to see with the movie. It's another one. Transformers give the capacity to train massive amount of data sets very, very, very quickly. So when the first scientists discovered this paradigm a few years ago, they said, wow, but we can put like terabytes of data. Let's do that with the whole internet. And let's see what will happen. And that was a test. And now, well, you have ChatGPT or other Anthropic or whatever that are able to pull off the whole internet, and you can ask whatever they want. It's like asking to someone that has read the whole internet, okay, give me what you think about this cocktail or whatever. And this is the second step, and this is opening massive amount of opportunities, and I think we are going to talk about that together. But there's a third level of generative AI, which is a bit more important for our industry, is multimodal generative AI. Traditional generative AI is just taking text as an input and delivering text. But we are working with video, right? So what you want is to have this capacity to take a video and being able to prompt a video, take a massive amount of video or live stream on being able to work directly on this video without having to prompt a text. And multimodal is taking into account lots of different contextual aspects, picture, transcription, face detection, on, of course, everything detection on every AI model that already exists. And this gives abilities to really have an understanding of what's inside the video and bringing the next level of AI. So the first breakthrough was when ChatGPT announced that it was possible now to put picture within the prompt. So now it's possible to do that and to ask lots of things to a picture, but it's very far from being able to do that from video. And what is unlocking lots of use cases is when it's possible to do that for video. So I can share some maybe example of what's possible. What will be possible tomorrow? Think about this ability to take this massive amount of data into account when you're taking a decision. Let's say you're working on a scripted TV show and you are reacting. You can react directly from what social is saying, social media reaction. So from one week to another, you can adapt the script based on everything that was said and generate a new script. You can also process a presidential debate in real time and start having insight. Okay, who is winning the debate? Who gave some ideas that were really new? Because the AI actually does not know only what's in the video, but also what's inside and what has been logged in the internet for 50 years. And that's something that a human cannot do. A human cannot know exactly what happened in the 50s. An AI can do that. Gen AI can do that. And there's also a lot of opportunities into contextual targeting, a capacity to build a 1-minute teaser of a 1-hour show that will be personalized for a specific audience. Remember about Netflix did a lot of noise about choosing, the good cover at the user experience, and they discovered that actually the cover make like 50% of the choice when you are looking for a show to watch. Think about if you are able to generate a teaser, like 10, 15 different teasers, that are dedicating to a specific audience, to a specific niche. Then you can have way more engaging content and better user experience.
I should stop and pause for a second. If anybody are we kind of good on a baseline then for making the distinction? Okay, just want to make sure we're all there, because this is complicated stuff. All right, so I want to lay out some of the major prospective use cases of Gen AI, and in terms of news, marketing, and sales. Now, Aaron, he and I were talking about something else some weeks ago, and then we started talking about the degree to which he was using Gen AI in his own daily output at Ticker. And I said, you need to come into this conversation, because he was sort of bold in the expansive use in which he is using it daily right now to make content. So, Aaron, why don't you walk us through, I know it's hard without being able to demo it, but if you can kind of paint a word picture of the ways in which you're using it on a daily basis right now.
Kind of fell out of my mouth. The next thing, you invited me on a plane from Australia here to talk about it. I shouldn't have said anything. I was surprised that I didn't think it was unusual. I think it was the thing when we were talking on that Zoom about it, because as a journalist who went from 20 years of working in newspapers and radio and broadcast, I remember my first job at the age of 15. I was asked to rewrite the faxes that would come through about press releases. And I would say, you realize that there's email, and we could just actually copy and paste. And the editor said, do you want your job to go? And that was kind of the viewpoint. And from there, I've kind of jumped on every new technology that I can find, run into it, but run away from it if it doesn't work really, really quickly. So we at Ticker, a streaming news platform, we haven't been around for 100 years where we have to take a huge number of staff with us and explain what we're doing all the time. We essentially get to every 6 months, decide who we want to be. It's a great position to be in. And obviously in the times we're in, it's a great position to be in. So we have news service. We basically we have a streaming news service which is 24/7. And in that we make a whole bunch of 13-minute broadcasts, essentially. So some of them are live, some of them are pre-recorded. And in those 13 minutes, the reason we chose 13 minutes is great duration for YouTube, great duration for a podcast when we turn it into that. And then we had a whole bunch of people who we used to call journalists, and now what are they? They're coordinators. I mean, dealing with young journalists these days, as much as I love and adore the profession, given what the task is at a TV news channel these days, I often say I'd be better off employing someone who works at a McDonald's drive-through who's used to high churn, getting the orders right, or getting shouted at, because journalists want to create something spectacular. They don't want to be doing, as I said earlier, writing 6 straps for an interview or writing 10 questions for a presenter they don't like, particularly if I'm the presenter. So no one wants to do a mundane job, and we have been able to increase our volume while decreasing the stress, the tension. To give you an idea, my day starts at about 5 a.m. We have a team here in New York. I touch base with, see what's been happening overnight. Then at 7 a.m., head to a beautiful French restaurant in Melbourne with the team, where we sit there for an hour with our laptops, using a mixture of either ChatGPT, Canva, so that we can turn our content. We choose our themes, what's happening, going through all the RSS feeds, including our partnership with Reuters. And then we essentially say these are going to be our main topics today. We have a journalist here or there. Our interviews will be these people. We write from hand the content for the website. And then we use ChatGPT to essentially, with one little button, which is a Chrome extension, it's a summary tool. It turns, and we've obviously built the prompts. There's about 10 different prompts. With one click of the button, it rewrites our web article as the intro for the presenter, the question that the presenter asks at the top of the show, 10 questions, the strap for 5 different types of straps. And then once we do the show, the API that we get from our newsroom tool, which we built with a wonderful team named Tinkerlist in Brussels, we get that API data that goes into our CMS. It automatically cuts up the video for the best grabs that it thinks will work for social media. And then from there, it's actually able to turn our content from the interview into 300 words that Google will approve of. And then we take it even further, where it will choose from our Reuters library the best thumbnail that will go with it. So instead of having to have a social media team, which in other words, are 25-year-old journalists who desperately want to be on air, and me constantly having to say, when you're ready. The fact is, no one got into this industry to do that job. So it's been a really wonderful experience for us. We've done everything from using it for voiceovers. So during COVID, when everyone had a croaky voice or just didn't come to work, we were using it for voiceovers for packages. I hated it, right? You still want to have this. Nothing will ever replace a happy human face.
So in other words, a lot of things.
I could go on.
Yeah. Okay. But you're getting an idea. Colin, at Morgan Murphy, you are using it to version. Now, versioning is like a tedious, horrible thing that people hate to have to do. It's like you do the one thing, you made the product, and now it's got to have 5 different iterations. So how are you doing that?
Yeah. So, going back to the spring, it was very obvious we needed some set of framework, how we're going to deal with this in our newsrooms. And so we essentially created guidelines that bucketed generative AI uses into 3 different areas. One was back office uses. We said we were already doing some of that. Let's go ahead and use it in any capacity we think makes sense from a back office, non-consumer facing point of view. The second category was to modify our original content. So if we created the original content, we were cool using and are using generative AI to create other versions, and I'll get back to that in a second. The third use was to create original content, and we said we weren't willing to do that at this point. So on the versioning part of it, exactly what, you just mentioned, there are, if you think about sort of a traditional television newsroom, what percentage of the human hours in that newsroom is actually devoted to creating original content? Not a high enough percentage for my taste. I'd like that number to be much, much higher. It's probably 25 to 40% right now. I think it should be 80% of the time that we spend in our newsroom is to create original material. How do we use generative AI then to do all the other tasks that we know are important to get a newscast out, to get social feeds out? What you're doing is already down that path of where I think this should go with the right guardrails and the right technology in place. And so we're trying to figure that out. Right now, we've encouraged our teams to take broadcast scripts and to have a first draft of a web article. We've encouraged our teams to create first drafts of broadcast teases or social media posts. And so we're
first drafts with ChatGPT.
Using LLMs to try to give yourself that sort of head start. And that process of, it took me 30 minutes to rewrite this story for a web, is down to 4 minutes, right? You've got a draft, you make modifications, you publish. We still have a standard of saying we're not going to publish without human eyes looking at it. So that's where we are right now.
Philippe, can you talk a little briefly about you have a tool. How does it work?
So in a very simple word, we are giving eyes to LLMs. That's our work. That's what we call video understanding. What we are doing for our customer is most of the time they're saying, I'm spending too much time building stories. Whether it's original or whether it's repurposing, it's too long. And they say, building a 3-minute news story is a 4-hour process. I need 3 people to do that. Whereas writing a draft of a news article is 3 minutes with ChatGPT, adjusting a draft. So what we're doing is splitting into different steps. What is the process to build a story? And we've isolated 3 steps. Sourcing, editing, publishing. Sourcing meaning that you need to find the good pieces relevant of content to tell your story. And this is 50% of the time, actually. Editing, this is the funny part that everyone wants to do, but actually that's only 30%. And the rest is publishing, making sure that you have the good SEO description, good chapterization for YouTube, for example, to make sure that the audience can find the video. We are acting on the first step, sourcing content, on the last step, publishing. So we have developed an AI that is called MXT1, that is able to understand what's inside the content to make the content searchable. And that's also this capacity to generate insights on a live stream, to generate insights of million hours of video of archive, so that it's very quick to build content. And our claim is to say building stories is 75% faster now. And obviously for repurposing, I think it should be just maybe 99% time faster. And that's the easy part, actually. So that's what we're doing. Whether it's for live stream or archive, our technology is able to analyze 500 hours per minute so that we can really streamline all the process on giving insight on real time. That's what we're doing.
Okay. I also want to just brief, and anybody can take this, maybe Colin or Michael, you want to take this. What about the sales and marketing applications? Roughly, what do we have available to us on that front right now?
Well, I know Gray is doing a big sales effort right now for proof ads, correct?
Correct.
And that's a pretty cool idea, being able to get some early creative in front of potential clients and those kinds of things. Additionally, talking about taking different versioning of the same stories and doing that over. That's what we're doing inside of marketing every day. You take a long piece and you're trying to make it short, make it poppy, get some editorial control in there as well, and pushing, being able to take the same content, repurpose it in multiple ways. That's something you do a lot inside the advertising context every day.
Can I just quickly jump in on that as well? From our perspective, for our sales team, so much time is spent, obviously, from a native advertising perspective, trying to find people on LinkedIn who might be willing to spend some money on Ticker to have some thought ownership on a topic that we think that they would really suit. The trouble is that for a long time, we were sending out generic prospects, basically. We were sending out a PDF which had our logo at the top. And if we wanted to tailor it for them, it took a real long time. There are now tools out there that will create an entire kind of PowerPoint 6-page document, searching the internet for their graphics, their look, their color scheme, plus ours, and put the whole, and it takes 5 seconds. I'm not going to say that you send out the first thing it generates, I might add, but it already looks like when our sales team get the CEO or the marketing manager on the phone and we say, check your email, it's there in front of them and we can talk them through and help them to imagine what it will look like.
There's maybe one other use case regarding ad sales that discussing with a lot of people, and we know that the cookieless experience in like 1 year is going to be kind of a big game changer. There's some lot of words regarding contextual targeting. And we know contextual targeting is the future, and there's tons of things to do. There's one that can be quite easily activated. Is we know that advertising on hot news is complex. There's issue of brand safety, and not so many. Actually, lots of brands that don't want to advertise for hot news. That's very difficult. When you're able to achieve a good understanding and a good description of what is incoming in your live stream, what is happening, then you can achieve good contextual targeting, making sure that then the ad server can know, okay, I'm not talking about the Hamas. I can maybe shoot something else rather than, advertisement for pharmaceutics or stuff like that. And so it's another use case that makes it possible, and then generate new revenue streams for local news TV station, which are relying a lot on that. So that's opening this opportunity. It was really not possible before.
Okay, so Michael, there has been no small amount of worry about applying Gen I in a news context. So I'm going to give you the difficult task of quickly characterizing and summarizing the major concerns from the vantage point of newsroom employees, leadership, and consumers. In terms of both, and mainly the ethics, but also to some extent the economics.
And we can do this for the next week and a half.
That could be a seminar.
To talk about a lot of the fears. I think there are a lot that are really well-founded as well in terms of, we're talking about efficiencies and ways to improve the tasks that we all have in front of us. I think there's real fears that potentially that also means that, hey, we could do less with fewer people. I think that there have been lots of examples of AI generating content, be it good or bad, that might be looked as content that's generally created by newsrooms right now, for sure. I think that's a fear. I think there's also a fear of the amount of content that's being produced in the world today is way more than it was 5 years ago. And so that content it could be misleading, it could be wrong, and it's really difficult to sort through, and something that a human really needs to be able to do. And then losing the human context is actually a really important piece as well. AI does provide really good first drafts of items, but sometimes, a human needs to be there to tell the actual critical pieces of the story. And losing that, I think, is a real fear. AI can create a lot and do those kinds of things. I think the other thing to keep in mind is, I think a lot of us cut our teeth working, rewriting stories and taking data and turning it into narrative format, and AI does that really well. So how do we keep those pipelines running and get those young people?
People don't need to make their bones anymore in the same way.
Oh, it was an awful job, but it was the way we got into the industry, right?
Yeah. Well, Aaron, as somebody who's digitally native here and not from a legacy broadcast organization, do the concerns that you hear seem quaint to you and easily navigable around?
Well, I just have to correct you there. I am from a legacy broadcast background. For my entire career, I worked for organizations. I wish I was only 4 years old, but I'm not. Well, where do I begin? I take everything on board that you say, and all I can think of is the amount of shocking errors I've made as a journalist. That I wish I could turn back time. People that I trusted as sources who got things wrong. One of my best is always the listen to authority that people always say. And the amount of times I rocked up at a fatal house fire as a young journalist, and the firefighters would say it was a 22-year-old man, and it would turn out to be 3 days later a 65-year-old lady. But for 3 days, we've been telling the story of it being a 22-year-old man. Human beings make a lot of mistakes. If I was on Titanic, I wouldn't have minded an AI captain sitting in the background giving us a bit of a hand, looking out ahead. So I think that the decisions that we make are very much based on emotion, and that's what makes newsrooms bloody fun to be in, I might add, and would never want to lose that. But when I look around newsrooms these days, they're not fun anymore. They are hard, they are tiring, and it is really difficult. I just had to let go of a great future journalist just recently. And I said to him, this isn't the right job for you. And he said, I've been coming to that realization. Now, he went to university, loves the profession, as I do. But his job is making sure that guests are logged in time for a live interview. His job is making sure that he remembers to put the 2-word strap at the top of the show. Otherwise, we go live with 2-word strap here. And that's not, I could see that this passionate future of our industry, protector of our industry, needed to be in a job that was not versioning content, needed to be in something that was going to make him or her or they really happy. And that's where I see that if AI can assist with the boring bits, the things that shouldn't really be done. I mean, do you remember when Threads came around and there were all these people going, yeah, stuff Twitter. And everyone in our office went, oh my God, another platform. What are we going to have to do for this? And that's the reality. It started off with get it in the newspaper. I remember just writing a story. It would go off to the sub, then off to the editor, then magically appear on a Tuesday morning. And it would magically get driven around. These days, I have to be thinking about which headline, what the H2 will go to, what the H1 will go to. As you mentioned, the image that has to go with it as well. I remember just taking a cool photo to go with the story as a cadet journalist. Now it's the thumbnail. And can we get President Biden shouting and freezing him there because it looks great? These are things we never had to think of. And it just keeps adding and adding and adding. So I'm not really saying that I think AI will take away jobs. I think we as an industry have done a wonderful task of that for a really, really long time without AI being around. But I also think about one of my favorite newsreaders in Melbourne. He's been around for a really long time, since the 60s, doing the same job. And he said that when auto cues came around in the 1970s, he used to pretend to look down at his pages because he was so embarrassed that people would know that he was actually reading the script on a lens. So I think that we've always been scared of change.
So one of the major issues with Gen AI is the speed with which it's constantly learning and improving upon itself. So, James, how is that putting pressure on news organizations in terms of assimilating the velocity of developments that are going around this technology?
Well, I think it seems to me just that the pressure is really on the AI companies.
That's so.
Well, I say that because AI as a set of algorithms, it is the computer teaching itself, but it's not really teaching itself. It's learning from us. So it needs our current content, our historical content in order to learn to speak. It's like a child. It's like a child learning language from his parents and needing to consume movies and pop culture in order to know what the next step should be, what is the next logical statement to be made in something. So I think really the pressure is on the AI companies to get from us so that it can make profit from the things that we have done historically. I just want to add something to the conversation. Like, I think that our quest for efficiencies cannot override our service to the public. So we can gain our efficiencies, but if we're not producing a product that the public needs, then what are we really doing?
So can I jump on that? I mean, I think, one of the things that we have communicated from the beginning was we want to invest more of our time in original content, more local content, better quality content. So if you look at it through that lens and you say, how do we use these tools to accomplish that goal, to spend more time on the things that we uniquely do, I think that has been a message that's well received. The other thing that I would say is, how do we use these tools to help train our journalists to do better journalism? So if you think about just sort of like a simple Grammarly tool or something like that, how do we create a model like that is giving cues to the journalist as the journalist is writing the story about how to make this story more impactful, serve our community better? I think we can use this to actually make better journalism.
I kind of agree. I think one traditional thing about AI is to think about efficiency, and that's true, for versioning, for example. But the relevant question is, how much better can the story be with this technology? And with the incoming presidential election, I think there will be tremendous use case to work on, because it's going to be able to have very quick reaction, quick insights, on that for original content might be very, very inspiring.
We do a lot of work as journalists, serving our community, but we also do an awful lot of C work, if I'm being generous. I think AI has a real opportunity to move us to a minimum threshold that perhaps is better in a B state.
Well, you're all kind of talking about leveling up in a way. If someone's good at telling a story, on camera, but they're not so good writing, perhaps, and for instance, that this could help, shore up a text story that might be a bit rickety. So, go ahead.
How about perceived bias? I mean, could the model be trained to identify bias within our reporting and try to help the journalists understand when there's something that they don't perceive themselves? And I think there's already people that are working on things that do exactly that. And I think that's an opportunity as well. Sorry, Michael.
No. James, you are central to Gray's group-wide response to AI, both internally and then in terms of what you communicate about what is permissible at the company to the public, and you have public-facing statements to that end. So can you explain a little bit about how that apparatus has come together?
Yes. So earlier this year, we formed a task force because we knew we couldn't. We have 113 markets, so just a little bit. I mean, there are guidelines, and then there are human beings who are supposed to be following the guidelines. So the more people you have, the more concern that you have that someone is going to do something that is going to violate copyright or breach trust with the audience. So we put together a task force. That task force includes, news heads like me, people from engineering, from sales, from marketing. And we discussed AI. We discussed how we would want to speak to the public in general about our use of generative AI. If you go at the bottom of any one of Gray's websites, you will see in little fine print at the bottom a statement about all Gray originated journalism is created by humans, and then it links to a document, which is a one-pager that talks about our core tenets when it comes to generative AI. It speaks to the fact that we're not a company that doesn't love innovation, but we want to be careful. We need to be cautiously optimistic about the potential with this, that we're going to prioritize our employees, our teammates, and our audience over any benefits that we could derive from AI. And so we have that forward-facing document, but we also created these use cases for every discipline. So from the journalists to the sellers who are using Waymark, which is what you mentioned earlier, to engineering to HR. We created use cases. Those are not public-facing, but those are things that we discussed internally. And then this group meets together quarterly to just what is the latest on AI, what are the latest innovations, what are the latest uses, what feedback have we gotten from the station. So we created a email distribution list where any one of our thousands of employees can ask us questions about their potential use of AI for an efficiency in their job. So we're constantly getting feedback from that and trying to modify this, what we would call a living use case document.
I wonder if quarterly is going to be enough as we go on and this gets faster and faster, right?
We will see.
So, Michael, you responded at Graham by doing a survey because people were like using this thing, and then you go, wait a second, and it turned out you were surprised by the results you got.
It was a very similar providence as James was talking about in terms of gathering the news directors, news leadership, engineering, digital, and legal. And we all got together and we kind of looked at each other and said, how much is AI actually being used inside of our organization? And there were people who were saying, no, it's not being used anywhere. It's, it's still new. It's technology. And there were people on, like myself, who's like, I use this every single day. There is no way this isn't being used across the company. And so we actually sent a survey out to our entire group, effectively asking them, do you use AI? When do you use AI? And the response, it was a spectacular response. The excitement around AI, just sending an email out saying, fill out the survey with AI, massive results. I don't think I could have ever asked for a better response.
Sounds like a BuzzFeed headline or.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, never believe it. But the number of people who are using AI, even for day-to-day, headline writing, initiatives and drafts and things like that it was actually really surprising to all of us. I think I don't think anyone was using it to directly publish, but they were certainly using it inside the context of our group. And so that told our, this task force how critical it was not only for us to get ahead of that and make sure we have clear guidelines so that way we don't breach that trust, we don't get ourselves into any sort of trouble, but also to bottle up that excitement and turn it into something that we can then share and optimize and serve our communities better with.
You might have to pull a few of those horses back into the barn, right? Because like headline writing is a discriminatory task. It's the kind of thing. Do you want to allocate that right away to the?
I think the amount of times that a headline is rewritten or experimented with or things like that.
Yeah.
It is a significant portion of time that's spent on that. And you tell AI to give you 10 versions of that headline, and no way we're going to let AI directly publish that. But you get 10 versions of that headline back and let an editor choose that. That saves them 15 minutes. Pretty quickly. I mean, even a skilled editor who writes headlines for a living, they find it insanely useful.
I want to take the time that we have left to kind of pull together some concrete advice for the C-suite on how they should be most proactively and responsively leaning into Gen AI right now. So first of all, how anybody can take this. How should they be best informing themselves on a continuous basis? What's best practice there?
I would suggest the thing to do is to think of a problem and then think of a solution, put it into Google and see if there's an AI thing that may help, and there probably will be. Then give it a test before you put it into the marketplace of your staff and just use a common sense approach. Does this make life better? I'll give an example. one of the things that were really frustrating was our deliverables for our clients. They need 5 different grabs from each interview so they can put it on their social media. That means an editor who would love to be making a crafted documentary was going through and putting together, choosing 5 grabs that they couldn't care less about. So I thought, surely this is something AI could do. And so there, in fact, is a product where you upload the file, can even take it off YouTube. It then goes through it, finds 5 grabs, puts it in vertical format, widescreen format, or square format, sends it out for you. The only trouble is, it takes about 2 hours. And and you got to keep the computer running on it. It takes too long. A human beat AI on this one. And that's my point. If it's not, I'm not sitting here saying it is perfect at all. I take your point. It will give you 10 versions of something. I don't choose one. My headline probably ends up being an amalgamation of them all. It makes me feel stupid, and I love that.
But for the time star, like Michael, do you go to Catherine Badalamenti and say, look, do you have like a kind of a standing thing where you might say, these are the things you need to know about that have happened in the last month or so?
I think that email distribution list and where you're getting all the feedback from many different sources is really critical. We talk about it a lot. How is that going to be sustainable in the long term? I have signed up for more free trials of AI companies. I need an AI to manage my AI companies.
Remember to cancel them. I think I was spending like $4,000 at one point because I forgot to cancel them.
My AI and my credit card, it catches it every now and again. But for real, it is, I think there's a lot of different, I have four different pillars, if you will, to think about this stuff. One of them is project-based, and I think it's really important to think about the projects that AI can be applied to and how that can rigorously be tested, and then, shelved and then redone again. The other one is guidelines and legal. I think that it's really important that the legal team, talks about AI, make sure they're protecting your IP, make sure that we're not potentially doing, when we're doing bias testing, making sure that we're not introducing our own bias or the AI's bias in there. The next one is actually the commitment to the newsrooms, to both our journalists and also to our community to maintain that trust. And I think that's a really important piece of communication that should be separate from like the guidelines that also could be, inside of the group. And then finally, there's that idea of, hey, these AI systems are using our content and using them as a source. I think that there needs to be a larger conversation about what that looks like. And I think all 4 of those are areas of study and that people should have specializations in. And that's a framework that we've been working on to make sure that we've got the education running through there.
And I'll just add this, I know we're talking about AI generally as a functional help in our workflows, but I think another way of informing ourselves, because I'm a news guy, is investigating AI's use in the public square. Investigating how AI, as it developed, is being used in government and in healthcare and in different areas of our society. That would be one way to keep ourselves informed.
James, are you happy with the organizational structural response that you have framed up at Gray to deal with this? And how is that evolving? Who needs to be on that group, or in that group rather? As you mentioned, legal, for instance, as part of it. Who else needs to be on that team evaluating developments?
Well, from a departmental standpoint, we feel like we have the right people in the task force, but we're relying on continual feedback from the teammates at the 113 television stations to talk to us about things that they would like to do to be more efficient in their jobs. Now, we don't do many push downs in our culture. So we don't say you must. But in this particular case, there's so much at stake, we feel, with the use of AI, from things that I've already mentioned, copyright violations, plagiarism, and just more eroding trust in us to be serving the public, that we want to have a heavier hand in the conversation with the stations, the individual journalists in our markets about what they're doing. So I'm happy with I am happy with the people who are on that task force, but it really extends to all of our employees.
Do you foresee the advent, not necessarily particularly at Gray, but in the industry of a chief AI officer as necessary to arbitrate here? Or any of you feel that way?
Well, to me, so being on the other side, the AI vendor, we feel that what's happening right now is there's two kind of users. Users that want to test and they're already testing, and users that don't want to test. And I think probably the first thing is not to be too strict about users that want to try new stuff, new ways of doing things, and starting to put barriers and obstacles to make sure it's complex, and then they will ask the question. I think it's not the good way. Well, it's European way, but I think it's not the good way here because it's moving fast and it's driving lots of value. And we figured out that it can bring a lot of time, more value than what the human is doing. I'm going to share with you a story. The first customer where we deploy our new Gen AI was in the Middle East, and they wanted to have insight regarding the interviews they were doing. And they compared what human did manually and what the machine was doing. And we expected the machine to be not as good as human. And actually, we reached a score of 110%. No, there's some mistake. No, actually, at the end of the day, their journalists are tired, and their insight they were giving were not good. So it's an example where it can bring really more value on giving users or super users or middle management kind of a way to, or maybe incentive them to test. Okay, go and test Anthropic and compare that to ChatGPT. And I think it's a good approach. And I would go even further is create a kind of a bonus system for the middle management. Arrive with an idea of the project regarding one of our priority in AI, and then you will have a bonus at the end of the quarter if the project is a success. And I think it can work. Some organizations are doing that. And then when the incentive is here, okay, let's start then to make sure that what we're doing is great, is good, and we can scope the usage of that. But before setting a scope, I think we should know what it can bring.
Okay, the MC and the moderator and me are at war right now. We're very over time, but I do want last question for you, Michael, just to speak to. So I want to touch on the IP, which you brought up before. What do C-suiters need to understand about IP and Gen AI learning from it without permission? What do they need to know right now, just in less than a minute?
This is going to change a lot in the near future, but the tools are giving you more opportunities to choose what is on it and what isn't. And I don't know if anyone quite knows what the ramifications of each of those are currently. I believe wholeheartedly that these companies will need original content and need reporters doing real reporting in especially local communities like we serve. And so to that point, they should be paying us to do that, or else it goes away. If our communities are getting the answers from an AI system without coming to us and seeing an advertisement, that's going to be a problem in the long term. And so the marketplace has to work this out, because AI doesn't work unless there are humans doing human things to make the AI do more human things.
For now.
Yeah, for now. And so from a C-suiter's perspective, I think it's really important to keep your finger on that pulse. Understand, yes, you can block OpenAI right now. Yes, you can block some portions of Google, maybe more than you want. But is that long-term success or is that long-term failure? I do think that reaching those deals, and I really hope that we can talk to these companies that are crawling our stuff to ask them to share the success of the AI model.
We have just scratched the surface here, but we are wildly over time. So thank you all so much for your insights. I appreciate it.